Welcome to Countdown to Decision 2024 with the James Dobson Family Institute. I'm Joseph Backholm, and in every episode, we want to give you the information that you need to be great stewards of the authority that God has given you in the upcoming election. As always, I'm joined by my co-host, Alison Centofante. Hi, Alison.
Hey, Joseph. Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here and so excited for our guest today. Katy Faust is an incredible mother, leader, writer, and I really just feel like her rocket is about to take off with her new book, Pro-Child Politics. Katy is the founder of Them Before Us, an organization dedicated to advocating for children's rights, which is a neat concept in the context of family structures and the way the world looks at putting adult desires over the needs and rights of children. And her work highlights everything from the importance of prioritizing children's needs in terms of how we look at abortion, how we look at IVF, surrogacy. But her latest book compiles experts across the realm to look at everything from border policy to budget. And so for that reason, I am so excited to ask her how she's thinking about November 5th, this next election. Katy, thank you for being here with us.
It's really a joy to be with you. I'm so grateful that you guys are highlighting these issues in a way that centers the child in these conversations, because the reality is that we actually can and should look at all the major political issues, whether we're in the ballot box or whether we're talking at the Thanksgiving dinner table about children. I mean, really, they are the ones that pay the greatest price when we get these questions wrong.
Yeah. Jump into that for us, Katy. How your background starting Them Before Us began. I know if you could share a little bit about your personal story and how it led you to start this organization.
Well, really, the reason I got into this is because in the marriage debate, when that first started heating up in my state of Washington, what I heard the other side saying is things like, well, kids don't care if they have two moms or two dads. And I had been working with kids for a couple decades. My husband has been the senior pastor of our church for 14 years. Before that, we were doing youth ministry ever since we were in college. Now he's a full-time Navy chaplain. I mean, we've got a lot of close contact with kids at every age. And I'll tell you something. Kids care whether or not their mother and father love them and love each other. And so the lies that I was hearing from the pro-gay marriage camp, that kids don't care if they've lost their mom and dad, I was like, wait a second. If kids are being raised by two men or two women, that means they've lost their mother or their father. And that is something in my observation, working with kids, even as the former assistant director at the largest Chinese adoption agency in the world, I can tell you, kids care. Kids care whether or not they're connected to their mom and dad. And sometimes it can leave a lifelong wound. So I got into it in one part because I said, don't weaponize the wounds of children to advance your political aims. The other reason I got into this is because there were, in my opinion, that was the first big cultural conversation where it wasn't just two different sides saying, you're wrong about this policy. No, you're wrong about this policy. What I heard the gay marriage supporters say is, if you don't support gay marriage, it's not that you're wrong. It's that you're evil. You're bigoted. You're hateful. And I think like a lot of traditional marriage supporters, I took that personally because my mother has been in a relationship with her partner since I was 10. And I've grown up with them. I've loved them. They've been a big part of my life as an adolescent, as a college student, as a young married, as a mother myself, and now, as my children move into adulthood. So this accusation that hatred, phobia, bigotry was behind somebody's support for traditional marriage also was enough to sort of push me into the public square to start talking about why marriage is not about adults, why it's not about their identity or their validation or their desires or their feelings. Marriage is primarily a matter of justice for children. So after several years of writing, I founded Them Before Us, which seeks to prioritize children in all matters of marriage and family, whether we are talking about reproductive technologies, the definition of marriage, a proper understanding of divorce, who adoption is for, hint, not adults, it's for kids. And now we are moving into really trying to coach people in understanding why every major political issue is actually a matter of justice for children.
Katy, you mentioned there the idea that kids need both a mother and a father, and the fact that that is now a controversial thing to say. Just yesterday, I was in the airport and I ended up in line in security behind two men with a baby carriage. And as we're slowly moving through there, somebody asked, we find out this baby in front of us is 2 days old. And we've all seen like brand new children. 2 days old. Now, I didn't ask the details, but I think I know what was happening there, where these two men had just taken this baby from the woman, from its mother who gave birth to it, because they purchased it in a contract through a surrogacy contract, and they were taking it away from its mother, and who knows if it will ever see that child again. I was surprised at the amount of anger I felt about that situation, because a 2-day-old child is as vulnerable as a child, as a human being can be, really. And removed from that situation, presumably because they wanted it, and I'm sure their intentions are good, but it really highlighted for me in a personal way the kind of the commoditization that we are now seeing of children. They want this child, they're going to take the child, mom is just in the past. Now, is that an issue? While we see it more often, is it actually on the ballot?
Yes, it is. Children's right. Now, so what we talk about at Them Before Us is we actually advocate for children's rights. And I understand that term gets a lot of flack because it has been misused, abused, and adulterated by the left. But children actually do have fundamental natural rights on which we must advocate and for which we must advance and argue. They have a right to life. We're pretty familiar with that. But children also have a right to their mother and father. These are fundamental natural rights that existed pre-government that will always be true, whether or not our civil laws recognize them. And what you saw, that visceral response, is exactly the appropriate reaction when you see an intentionally motherless baby. We understand that sometimes children lose their mother or father to tragedy. And you know what we do? We mourn. But that's not what's happening today in the world of marriage and family. Largely, children are losing their mother or father, not because of tragedy, but because of intentionality. Because there's been a trifecta movement in our country between culture, law, and technology that in essence have rendered children to be accessories to be acquired and obtained and awarded to whatever adults has the money and means to purchase them. We see this co-opting happening, this threefold overhaul of our idea of marriage and family culturally, by repeating phrases like love makes a family. We see it legally, where we have made marriage a genderless institution. When we made husbands and wives optional in marriage, mothers and fathers became optional in parenthood law. And now we see technology that allows us to assemble children in a laboratory, very often with the gametes of somebody who is not going to raise them. And so we are seeing really mothers and fathers being made optional in all these different 3 areas. Now, the problem is, for that baby and for every other baby, their mother and father is not optional. It does not matter what 5 Supreme Court justices say. It does not matter how many times we say, if the adults are happy, the kids will be happy. It does not matter how we learn and innovate and tinker with children in petri dishes. Children need, deserve, and have a fundamental right to be known and loved by their mother and father, and they suffer when they lose one or both.
And Katy, how did we become, is that something, what you just said there, it seems so self-evident, and it's hard for me to think many Americans disagree with that. Is it something where we genuinely don't believe that kids need their mother and father, or we have been conditioned to deny that that children need their mother and father because it's politically incorrect, because it implies that a relationship involving two men is somehow not as capable of parenting as a relationship involving a man and a woman?
I think that there has been a massive campaign by very well-funded, well-organized multinational forces that have sought to demonize, humiliate, and emotionally manipulate people into getting on board with the family redefinition train. And they have been incredibly effective. I will tell you honestly, I didn't want to get into this. I don't like to be hated. I like to be loved. It was very scary for me to get into the most contentious cultural topics of our day. So much so that when I started writing about this, I did it anonymously, people, because I didn't want people to hate me. So that I just think that the emotional coercion to move the needle away from what is self-evident, what is common sense, what is probably the most scientifically verifiable fact that a child comes from a man and woman, right? That it has been so effective that many people have remained silent. I will also say that on a political level, when was the last time that you heard, especially a national politician, say, children need a mom and dad? My guess is it's been about 9 years now, right? Once we redefined marriage, we really did redefine parenthood. We redefined family in the cultural mindset, in the political mindset, because now we are told if you don't get on board, not just with two men getting married, but two men becoming the parents of a motherless child, that's discrimination. And they have been able to effectively trickle that down into a variety of different state level parenthood laws, where we are now making mothers and fathers optional in parenthood law. We are replacing mom and dad on birth certificates with parent one and parent two. We are literally saying that it's discrimination if you do not subsidize the fertility treatments of single people and same-sex couples. And so I will tell you, the silence that unfortunately a lot of us were kind of coerced into is having extremely damaging effects on children across the country.
Yeah. Powerfully said. I will always remember, Katy, when you came to a conference I was at early on in my time in Washington, D.C., and you shared your personal story about being raised by two women. And you said, I love my parents, but all the love in the world can never make a mom into a dad or a dad into a mom. And that has stuck with me for a decade, because we did hear from the left, hey, listen, we just need two loving people to raise children. This was the gay marriage, Obergefell fight. And that statement is still so true. For these children that are being created for the pleasure of adults, that 2-day-old baby that Joseph saw in the airport will cry out for its mother.
That's right.
And no mom, by the way, as you know, would ever have a 2-day-old baby in an airport. We would never.
Yeah, so that's really true. And I mean, let's just talk about it. What we do at Them Before Us is we seek to center the child in all these conversations. There is a natural tendency, anytime adults are talking about this, to center the adults. And I think that the left has moved the ball down the cultural field by framing adults as victims, by telling their stories, by empathizing with them and humanizing them and their suffering and their longing and their losses and their identity. And what we're doing at Them Before Us is we are constantly taking the spotlights off of the adults and shining it on children. So let's just do a little thought experiment, right, on what this 2-day-old baby has lost, because this has cost her greatly. Let's just assume it's a little girl, okay? So what has she lost? Number one, she has lost at least 50% of her biological identity, right? She was cut off from the genetic mother, probably an egg donor that was purchased on an egg donor catalog, probably filtered based on race, education level, age, fitness, health. They probably checked out the profiles and really figured out, well, this one's pretty. Well, she went to an Ivy League. Let's purchase this one. FYI, white donors go for a lot more than brown donors do. I mean, this is really a eugenics process. So that little girl is going to have questions as she grows about, who am I? It's very hard for children to answer the question, who am I, if they can't answer the question, whose am I? And those two men have cut off at least 50% of the answer for her. What else has she lost? Well, she lost the fundamental attachment, that first bond, the first person she has ever known for 9.5 months. And she has now restarted the clock in terms of bonding, attachment, and connection. We know that this will have long-lasting implications for children. Even brief maternal separation in the hospital, if the child has moved away to the NICU for a while or something, we know that even brief maternal deprivation can alter the brain structure. This is why we have stopped moving babies away and housing them in nurseries and instead kept them by the mothers, because we understand it's better, not just for moms, but for babies. That baby statistically is going to struggle with trust and bonding and attachment as she grows, because she was made to see the woman she already knew for the first time at birth, not the last. So they have saddled her with trust and attachment issues. What else has she lost? Well, children don't just need love in the abstract. They don't just need caregivers. They don't just need somebody who's changing their diapers and feeding them bottles. They actually crave and benefit from both maternal and paternal love. Men and women are different. They offer distinct and complementary benefits to children. Men don't mother. Women don't father. So she is going to be starved of a lot of the distinctives that mothers offer to children. Things like honing their fine motor skills. Moms do that in ways that dads don't. Women naturally simplify their language right down to the child's level. She'll say, "Oh, honey, did you get a boo-boo?" Men talk to their children like they talk to everybody else. "Hey, baby, that's a gnarly rug rash you've got," right? And so, like, her development is going to be hindered. Her language development is going to be hindered. Mothers naturally nurture and empathize with children in ways that men don't. We have measured their tolerance for infant cries, and women respond faster. There's literally a parenting expert that says, hey, if there's no woman, the man needs to function like a woman. And she has literally said they need to spray like oxytocin up their nose so they respond more like women, because men don't respond to infants the way women do. So she is going to be saddled with identity struggles, attachment issues. She is going to be developmentally disadvantaged. And she probably is going to experience something that we talk about at Them Before Us, which is mother hunger. She will hunger for the love of a woman. She will probably attach early and overtly and maybe obsessively to whatever woman is in her orbit in her life, because she not just needs that female love, she will crave it. So these men, in a desire to have a family that fits their romantic relationships rather than the child's natural right, is saddling the child with lifelong loss. And it absolutely is an injustice.
Katy, that issue, is it on, can you walk us through, is it on the ballot? How do we help? I mean, anyone who has explored surrogacy, IVF, and knows what you have explained wants to take action. And obviously neither candidate is great or perfect. We know that. But how should we as Christians look at solving some of these issues and putting children's rights back in its rightful place?
Mm-hmm. So our most recent book, which you mentioned, Pro-Child Politics, goes through cultural, economic, national issues, from immigration to energy to the environment to ESG and DEI to all the cultural topics. And on that, I would say largely the GOP is much better positioned to defend the rights and well-being of children when it comes to their life, their family, their mind, their body, their future, their finances, their opportunities. I mean, really, the platform of the GOP largely is going to advance the rights and well-being of children in ways that the Democrats are not. In fact, I would say it's hard to think of any issue where the Democrats actually are prioritizing kids. Most of what they say they are doing, they'll say they do it for the kids. In actuality, it almost always damages children rather than helping them. On the matter of life and family, which is really where Them Before Us focuses the most, I will say that there still is somewhat of an aura of defending the family and valuing the family when it comes to the GOP. Unfortunately, the most recent platform that they implemented removed the very explicit recognition that children need, deserve, and have a right to their mother and father, that it is a man and a woman. And I think, unfortunately, they did that because they thought it was politically expedient. Unfortunately, children are the casualty of that. Because if we are not going to be explicit about something that their own biology is explicit about, what we're saying is we would rather have votes than truly defend children. But I do think that the GOP is in a better position, especially with a lot of the people that do understand the importance of children's right to their mother and father, probably staffing the administration.
We can do that. But I think, the issues that you raise here, and it is really a helpful way to think about public policy, I think, in reframing things in terms of a child's rights. But elections are increasingly difficult, and there's a lot of people who are frustrated with choices presented to them, frustrated with the animosity in which the debates are engaged. And there's this desire to retreat because I just don't love what I'm being given. And honestly, like my experience yesterday at the airport, I think is illuminating in some ways, because when I go vote, I may not love the personalities at the governor's level or at the presidential level. But if I vote with particular people in mind, like that baby in mind, and I'm going to vote for that baby's future, and I'm going to vote to make sure that as few possible children find themselves in the same situation as that baby, and that there's judges in the future who don't remove children from good homes for political purposes. And there's this whole litany of ways in which these decisions make impacts on people's lives that is totally distinct from the personalities of the people who will be elected in 2024. And so honestly, like humanizing the impact of public policy in this way, it makes me, and I hope it makes other people, say, you know what? It might be a hard decision, but it really does impact people's lives. And I'm going to think about them when I cast my ballot, not necessarily the names on the ballot, the people impacted.
Yeah. How did those two men end up with the baby? Well, there are several things. Gay marriage led to this. Let's be very clear. There is a direct connection between redefining the family in ways that say children and their rights are not fundamental to this, and two men saying, I have a right to a child. Okay, so the legal change that was obviously largely pushed by the Democrats is a big reason why those two men were in the airport with a 2-day-old motherless child. What else? IVF. Okay, every child that is created through surrogacy is the product of IVF. That's in vitro fertilization. That just means making babies in glass, making babies in a petri dish. This is and has emerged and must always be recognized as the second front in the fight for children's right to life. I understand that there is some confusion around IVF, both at the layperson level and all the way up to the top of the GOP. And we need to clear that confusion right now. If we believe that children have a right to life from the moment of conception, we need to recognize that big fertility, the project, the process, the industry of making babies actually destroys more embryonic life every year than Planned Parenthood does. The way that they conduct IVF is not just about making babies. It is about making on-demand designer babies shipped worldwide on a mountain of children that were rejected. Whether it was because there was too many of them, because they weren't genetically fit, because they were the wrong sex, because they had the wrong eye color. The reality is that only about 3 to 7% of children that are created through IVF are born alive. So primarily, it's a right to life issue. Of that very small fraction of children created through IVF who are born alive, 1/3 to 2/3 of them are going to lose their mother or father and end up in a baby carrier with two men going through an airport when they are 2 days old. So how did we get there? Well, that's because commercial surrogacy is being passed state by state through bills that sound wonderful, innocuous, the Uniform Parentage Act. And I'll tell you, them before us, we fight all of the bills to seek to normalize commercial surrogacy. We fight the bills saying we should subsidize IVF at the government level or the insurance level because children are being victimized. And I'll tell you who we fight on all of those different matters at every single state: the Democrats. Okay, so you are right that we're going way beyond the personalities here. We are going to the platforms, we're going to the parties, we're going to the values that they are pushing. And unfortunately, in areas of reproductive technologies, from IVF to commercial surrogacy to simply redefining what it means to be infertile, so that single, double, or triple men, for example, can acquire children, subsidized children, unfortunately, we are always working against the Democrats because they seem to be anti-child in every way you can be anti-child.
Yeah. Yeah. And to that point, and then Alison, I'll let you go. I just want to add another fact to that great litany. There is an increasing desire on the left to require governments and insurance companies to pay for in vitro fertilization because the financial inability is one of the greatest obstacles. So if the government gets involved in guaranteeing payment for that service, we're going to see an exponential growth in the number of 2-day-old babies being transferred through airports because they just got purchased from its mother.
You are subsidizing the death of, right now, incalculable, because nobody's sharing the numbers, but probably millions and millions of embryonic children every year, and you will be subsidizing motherless and fatherless children. That is what subsidizing IVF means.
Yeah. You know, we talked a lot about IVF and surrogacy, which I feel like is the new frontier, right, of the conservative Christian leader. I mean, pastors need to wake up and do their research and listen to you on podcasts and read your book because it's enlightening. The abortion fight is still a part of what we're doing and IVF and surrogacy are part of that. Kids are lost, kids are killed, and we as Christians need to be ready to speak into this moment. But there are other ways we're seeing children's rights be delineated, and policies hurting them deeply. And I'd love for you to go there, Katy. Talk to us about, I want to go into the trans issue where we have children now leading that their feelings matter more than science, and grown adults allowing them to cut off perfectly healthy body parts and forever faced with an irreversible decision. And then also I want to get into the border, because we're seeing a lot of children. I just saw a video of a child in Times Square selling water bottles till 2 a.m. They were brought here by illegal immigrants. And he said a kid was taken in a van and I don't know what happened to them. I mean, this is what the reality of these children are now looking like. So how can we go in there, educate us as Christians on what's going on in the trans issue and the border?
Yeah. Thankfully, I feel like I can be pretty confident going wherever you want to go with this, because we just published a book where I conscripted 19 subject matter experts who have, Laura Reese wrote our immigration chapter at the Heritage Foundation. She's been doing this, for 20 or 30 years or something. And she took what is often a confusing, complex topic and boiled it down to 3,000 words, humanized it by sharing the real life story of a child who was victimized, and told us how we need to think about this from the perspective of child protection. Our chapter in Pro-Child Politics on Transgenderism was written by Chris Elston, better known as Billboard Chris, who walks around the world with sandwich boards over the top of his body saying kids can't consent to puberty blockers. He's one of the most well-known advocates against child transitions. And so they have made it easy for me to think and understand and talk about this. The book hopefully is going to do the same thing for you. But when I talk about children's rights, when I talk about their fundamental natural rights, not these made up slogans like children have a right to transgender treatments from Planned Parenthood. Children have a right to have a transgender identity hidden from their parents at school. Children have a right to sexual pleasure. Okay, those are nonsense, made up rights to really smuggle in child destroying ideas, technologies, and processes. So when I talk about defending children's rights, I'm talking about their natural rights. And you can pretty much capture that in 5 different rights. Their right to life, which you're pretty familiar with, their right to their mother and father, which we've talked about, their right to innocence. Okay, and this is important, right? Why do we get so riled up? Why is there something visceral in us when we see hypersexualized men in drag, reading library books and twerking to 3 and 4-year-olds? It's because we know that children have a right to innocence. And so in our book, we have an education chapter written by Tiffany Justice, co-founder of Moms for Liberty, talking about how so much of our education system has been corrupted. And part of that is the corruption of child innocence. And then children have a right to an intact, unmedicalized body. They should not be carved up. They should not be poisoned through cross-sex hormones and puberty blockers. So Chris spent 3,000 words hyper footnoted on what are these processes doing to children? How prevalent is it? Who is pushing it? What are the lies that we are telling children about gender, right? From kindergarten, all the way up through high school. And obviously there is an intersection there between parental rights, right? Trying to override a parent's right to direct the medical care, education, and upbringing of their child, and a child's right to have an intact, unmedicalized body. So these are very, very serious issues. I was surprised that this did not come up more directly in the debate between President Trump and Vice President Harris, because the reality is that this actually is an issue where there is large agreement on the left and the right, because there is something inside all of us that says, I want to know what's happening at my child's school. I want to know what identity you are calling them. You cannot take my confused 14-year-old and emancipate them without my knowledge, and then traffic them to a state that allows gender transitions if I say no. And so I actually think that the tide is turning. This is an issue we are winning. Unfortunately, again, this is something that the Democrats have dug in deep, and their ideas are not just devastating children, but killing them. I mean, these systems and these processes will take a child's life.
Well, and your example of trafficking a child to an abortion clinic or to a Planned Parenthood to get their medical, their hormone therapy is real. You know, we've heard of these stories of teachers becoming activists. And I think that's something to highlight, that the Democrats are creating activists at every level, including our teachers, where now they keep secrets with your children away from you and your grandchildren and push them towards confusion, push them towards acting on their own feelings. And I think a lot of parents I've seen in my own family and extended family are going, whoa, I didn't realize this great trifecta was happening where YouTube influencers are promoting them, promoting sex change therapy. You've got this school allowing it, encouraging it, teaching on it, starting clubs on it, keeping secrets and empowering it. And then you have the elites. You have the medical professionals making money off of it, more than happy to take your money and ask no questions to medically mutilate you, your child. I do think parents are waking up, like you said, and I do think it's important to say we have an opportunity to vote as Christians that biology matters, science matters, that there is truth, because ultimately this whole trans movement is a slap in the face to our Creator, who says, I have made you male and female. And so when we can see that that's at issue here, that we can vote towards putting people in place who understand that more than the other side, and who will at least protect a parent's right to disagree and to order their child's education. I think that that's an important win we have to see in November. And Katy, I'm just so grateful for you speaking into this. You're one of the most powerful voices on it. What do you think? You know, you mentioned in the debate, they didn't get into this. If you were, president, what policies would you put in place? You have that book, Pro-Child Politics. What can be put in place to protect kids?
A lot of states already have. A lot of states have already banned so-called transgender treatments, which is really just child mutilation, child sterilization at the chemical level, at the surgical level. This is absolutely, you are talking about like lobotomy level malpractice. Okay, we are going to look back on this in 10 or 20 years. We are going to say, we shaved the foreskin off of a girl's arm to create a faux phallus for her, and now she is constantly in the emergency. We are seeing 25-year-old children using walkers because the puberty blockers that we gave them made their bones brittle, and now they are not able to bear their own weight. I mean, we're already seeing the tides turn in terms of the detransitioners speaking up about how not only did this not solve the gender confusion and the mental health issues, it exacerbated it. They have the same problems, the same depression, the same suicide ideation, the same level of like phobias, the same comorbidities. Now they're just doing it with a body that cannot sustain itself, because whether they transition or detransition, they're going to be on hormones for life. That is what these medical treatments do. They don't change a boy into a girl. They change a healthy child into a lifelong consumer of pharmaceuticals and cosmetic surgery. And that is being made incredibly clear. And even though the sob stories, the horrible, horrible examples of these children who have been mutilated and harmed is not enough yet to stop it, the lawsuits will. Because doctors and medical organizations are starting to get sued. And I think hopefully their pocketbook will speak, even though they won't let the children speak themselves.
There's so much we could say about the policy here, but I want to go back to something you said earlier on into your own life and your own kind of venture into a public space and having a public voice. And you mentioned the fact that when you first started talking about these things, you did so anonymously. And you said, I wanted to be liked. And that's the place where a lot of people are right now, where they're like amening every single word that you say. But there's a lot of people who agree with us on these issues, but they're like, I'm not going to vote because I don't want to say who I voted for, because if I did, I would have to defend it, and that would be hard, and that would be emotionally difficult, and all of those things. And I'm certainly not going to do any work to make sure that truth wins on the ballot, because there's going to be a cost if I do that. Katy, speak to those people who are there. They're with you in substance in every single way, but they're so afraid of telling anybody what they think. They're so afraid of saying we shouldn't be doing that to kids because in their particular cocktail circle or whatever it is, their mom's group, they know that there are people who are going to say, oh, well, you're transphobic. Oh, you hate women. Oh, you're a misogynist, whatever that is. Talk to those people and that fear that they have.
I totally got you. I understand you. I know where you are. I've been there. I know that it looks like I'm some kind of crusader. I have had to become a crusader, but on that grace giver, truth teller spectrum, I'm a grace giver. I just want everybody to be happy. I overlook an awful lot of frustrations, disagreements in my own personal life because I would rather not rock the boat. The problem is our silence, my silence for a long time, paved the way for child victimization. And that is actually a no-go zone for Christians. Especially, I think all adults need to have a child protective attitude. But if you consider yourself a Christian, you don't get to choose whether or not you protect kids. This is and always has been a manifestation of our pure and undefiled religion before God. Children are being victimized in unimaginable, never before seen in our species kinds of ways. And those are the kind of things, if we do not speak up, if we do not defend them, then they will have no defenders. It is us. It is the demographic that says, you harm a kid, millstone around your neck. It is us, the ones that worship the Savior, that came first as a blastocyst, then an embryo, then an infant, then a toddler, then a teenager, then a human man, right? We followed the Savior that dignified children by his incarnation. We worship the God who says all people are made in his image, including kids. We follow through with the legacy of the first century Christians that rescued and fought for the poor and needy, the exposed infants, refused to sexualize them, right? Refused to abort our own children. We have that heritage, and we have to take that into our modern day threats to children, which unfortunately are really similar to the first century. Things like abortion, hypersexualization of children, the buying and selling of children, which is now manifesting itself in the world of reproductive technologies. I mean, we are actually retreading the same pagan ground that Christianity snuffed out because it brought these child dignifying principles and practices into the first century, and then the second and third, and then humanized children in such a way that we said these are image bearers that deserve full legal rights and protection. What I'm saying is, this is a hallmark of what Christianity has always been. And unfortunately, you do not have the option of whether or not to protect them. And let me just put this very, very starkly. It's the only thing that I've ever had pinned on my Twitter account. It says children's right to life is being victimized. Their right to their mother and father is being victimized. Their right to their innocence is being victimized. Their right to an intact, unmedical body is being victimized. Children are being victimized. Screw your social acceptance and start defending kids, because that is the calculation that you and everybody else has had to make. You can either defend kids or you can be liked. Don't pretend like you can do both. Sometimes you can't. And in those situations, you've got to choose the kids.
So good. Well, Katy, I really like you, even though you take this stand, and I think this is the next frontier for Christians. And so my last question for you before we wrap is, where can people find out more about this? Where can they get your book? Please let them know right now.
Order Pro-Child Politics on Amazon. I know it's an absolute monstrous beast, but it really does help authors get the word out. Go to thembeforeus.com, subscribe to the newsletter, donate to our mission. People ask me all the time, what are you trying to do? And my answer is global takeover. And I'm serious. We are going to represent the rights of children on all these fundamental matters in every country of the world, because that is what justice requires. And we would love to have you along on that ride, fighting shoulder to shoulder with us. And if you want all of my thoughts about every single thing, I am on Twitter way too much.
Katy Faust, thank you so much. And I will just add one thing. You point out the reality that there is a cost to doing the right thing and defending children, but there's a lot that you gain as well. And that includes friends all over the country and all over the world, and a family that is standing with you in solidarity. And that's part of what the body of Christ is supposed to be. Because we live in a spiritual world, we will have enemies, but we have the best friends and the best friend that you can possibly have. Yeah. So thank you so much for your courage and for being with us today.
No, nice. Like, you should just do all of my wrap-ups. I'm just going to sign you up to get on all my podcasts. That was absolutely fun.
Let me know. Blessings, Katy. And friends, thank you for joining us for this conversation. I know it has encouraged you, and if it's encouraged you, it's going to encourage somebody else as well. So share it with them so that they can know what you know, so that they can do what we are all doing together. Again, Countdown to Decision 2024 is brought to you by the James Dobson Family Institute. It's a blessing to be with you. God be with you until next time. We'll see you then.